That's
Continue on the 80s. Right? Joy, pump, pump, pump it up.
and
Pain,
pain,
sunshine,
sunshine, and
and
rain.
rain.
Give
Listen
it
to
to
the
the
Rob bass. Well, I'm a new kid. I'm just coming up. I love it. Yeah.
I don't
Then I was
remember the
thinking
words.
about that's a kind of an intro to the topic we're going to do today,
Oh,
right? And then there's another one I was thinking about. This another 80s, right? Meatloaf, remember?
I don't
And I would do anything
think
for
for
love,
love.
but I won't do that. I won't
That's
do
good.
that. And it's like the whole thing is, what is it that he won't do for love? And it made me
Hmm.
reminded us of advice that we give parents, our clients, all the time. That they just say, "Well, yeah, that's too hard. I would do
Yeah.
anything for my kids." What's the one thing
Yeah.
that a parent that if your years of working in the tragic arts,
Yeah.
20 some years and dealing with families and children of all ages and stages and capabilities, do you have a single rule, a single piece of advice to tell parents?
Listen to your children?
Have a conversation with them,
Yeah.
talk to them.
Get to know them so you can listen to them and hear them.
Yeah. And then there was
Sometimes that's
both
too hard.
a client that became a friend that becomes a client. Sometimes your clients become friends. But he came to us and he said, "Okay, I just need help with my kids." Awesome. Yeah, we can help you. Talk to them every day.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them probing questions, not just yes, no's.
Yeah.
Listen to what they care about.
Find out what they're dealing
And
with,
then he
what they're
came
going
back
through.
months later. "Okay, so I've got a very specific thing to, this kid this kid that." Whoa, whoa, whoa. Kristen, stop. Have you done what we asked, what we suggested before, which was to talk to your kids every day? Ask probing questions. "Yeah, that's hard." I said, "Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. It is hard to have conversations with your kids when you aren't truly cognitively invested in their independence."
Yeah, that's it.
And there's a principle of how you view your children, and it's really an extension of how you view any other human being. And it's a question of empathy and abstract thinking. Not just do you have empathy for another. Many cruel people utilize the gift of empathy in order to perpetuate their cruelty.
Mm-hmm.
So don't think of empathy as a pure virtue, just like love isn't. It's just really the ability to feel what another feels. But there's
Mm-hmm.
something different cognitively. Okay, that's feeling. This person has their own feelings and they feel bad like I feel bad. They feel happy like I feel bad. There's another component to that that's maybe even superior, which is this person has their own mind, their own consciousness, their own sense of, their own perception, their own sense of existence.
Mm-hmm.
And it matters. They have value because of their conscious sovereignty and bodily autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's hard to talk to your kids if you don't really view them as interesting beings with conscious sovereignty, their own thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
or bodily autonomy, their own senses, their own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
They're boring then.
And they also won't talk to you if they feel that from you.
Right. Uh, why did my kids not talk to me? You stopped talking to them, they didn't stop talking to you. You stopped talking to them, they didn't stop talking to you.
Yeah.
I would do anything for my kids. Would you treat them as, would you empower them to have conscious sovereignty and bodily autonomy? Well, I wouldn't do that. That's pretty hard.
That's against my
We we
belief.
agree. We agree. We agree. It's a challenge. You agree it's a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the big word, the word that everybody throws around and nobody understands or shares, right? Yeah, is it God? That's one. Is it love? That's another. But the word is trauma. Trauma, capital T, capital lowercase t, trauma. And every person is becoming more and more aware of the real impacts of trauma.
Yeah.
So this doesn't come from a false place, this hyper awareness on the impact and effects of trauma. But it's just we're not precise enough. We're not honest enough about what is and isn't trauma. We're getting to a place where we're just calling everything trauma, and so then nothing is. If everything is a traumatic, if everyone has PTSD, then no one does. Because PTSD is a pathology. It's a real, real thing.
Yeah.
So
with actual measurements to diagnose.
and it takes some real dysfunction and real issues, not just discomfort, to be diagnosed that. And it's rare-ish in society. And so if everyone's PTSD, no one is.
Yeah.
If everyone can be diagnosed with anxiety, no one is. If everyone has depression, no one is. If everyone's bipolar, if everyone has some form of a spectrum and a processing disorder, which is a processing order that makes the person feel disordered. But and
the
everyone
scale
is.
of like neurodivergence.
Yes, from DID and bipolar, and there's just too many diagnoses. ADHD, another one. It's too ubiquitous. It's too universal. And so, in the question of trauma, that gives you these diagnoses, because that's what these diagnoses have essentially replaced the word trauma. What do you mean trauma? Well, I have anxiety. That's meant to be a step away, and it's really appealing to a professional. My doctor says I do.
Yeah.
It's really why people give you their diagnosis. My doctor says.
Yeah.
But when I talk to people and they tell me, well, I've had a lot of trauma. I say, yep. Who hasn't? So some of the things you've just described, or what you've described so far, is the human experience. And in understanding trauma, we can at least tease it out. You said something. You said you heard someone try to define trauma just recently.
Oh, yeah. I was going to read that too.
Do you remember?
I remember it was Dan Siegel.
Okay. One of these secular prophets again.
Yeah. And he said something about trauma is something about when something happens and your system is unable to cope.
It's overloaded and you're unable to cope.
Yeah.
And overloaded with what, right? Well, stimulation, neuro juices, right? A neuropsychologist that I work with, that's considered an expert, says that trauma is stress that happens too soon, too often, and too intensely. And that's, I think, really profound. There's some wisdom in that. Okay, what's stress? Stress is conflict. Stress is violence. And it's why we can analogize emotional stress, emotional trauma, experiential trauma with bodily physio, trauma. Because I also heard in the world of emotional trauma, it's not just the bad things that happened to you that did violence to your mind. It's also the creative, developmental, cool things that children ought to experience that you didn't. The loss of what's a typical human experience. We're not saying, hey, wealth-driven experiences. We're talking there's certain connecting experiences with loved ones
Yeah.
that too many people don't
Mm-hmm.
have.
Yeah.
And so it's in both of those where trauma exists.
Yeah.
And what's trauma? Again, trauma does violence to the mind. It is a mind crime.
Yeah.
But it does injury to the psyche, to the mind, to consciousness, to cognitive functioning.
Yeah. To your your relationship with self.
With you,
Yeah.
your relationship to reality and your
Mm-hmm.
environment.
Yeah.
When it's when you're really injured, when you're really traumatized, right? You're scarring. Well, that's going to be a constant physical presence
Mm-hmm.
of an event. You lose a finger.
Yeah.
Are now low back injury, neck injury,
Like in
knee
pain
injury,
when you
hip,
walking.
joint,
Yeah.
hands, feet.
Changes you.
I am a different person now. This is
Yeah.
me now. This is
Yeah.
the Jim Jeffries bit. Like when you're sick and you're diarrhea and covered in, well, I guess this is just me.
Yeah.
But it's that. It's okay. The toothpaste ain't coming back in the tube. The bell ain't being unrung.
Mm-hmm.
Genie's out the lantern. This is now a different. I'm this way now.
Yeah. This is me
This is me
now.
now.
Yeah, for real.
And especially when it relates to there's two times when that happens. One I call developmental trauma,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's just stuff we all go through in growing up. In many ways, adverse childhood experiences are a part of developmental trauma. Kids are going to
Yeah.
experience real loss in the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. It's really a way to say this is a child who has experienced stress
Mm-hmm.
very early, very intensely, and maybe too frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These
Or
major,
even ongoing, the
sure,
frequently, like
sure,
constant. Yeah.
right, and it's these children who experience real complex emotions, loss, grief,
Mm-hmm.
betrayal, uh, um, terror, rage, uh, um, yeah,
Yeah. And
despair.
aren't able to really process
Right,
it
it's the things that invade.
fully.
Right. If the good things that happen to you, and they are when you get a really nutritious night's sleep,
Mm-hmm.
when you have a really high end, happy experience playing with your friends and loved ones, right? When you move, when you eat good foods with
Mm-hmm.
people that are connecting, you have an experience, right? The experiences that invade, that infect, that change, sleep,
Yeah.
nutrition, diet, movement, and how I relate to another person. Well, that's where trauma is going to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And so you can really evaluate through the things that invade and infect and have affected
Mm-hmm.
sleep. And there's a lot of people, oh, this is me now. I'm never going to get the same sleep. Now that I've seen that, now that
Mm.
it's like the movie Seven.
Oh.
I watched when we were adults. We were married. We were actually traveling,
Mm.
I think. And
That's intense.
there's a few scenes in that I was like, I don't want
Mm.
that in my mind. And in work, you're forced to, given the tragic
Mm-hmm.
arts that we do, you're forced to
Yeah.
read, hear, and watch things you just don't want to have in there.
Yeah.
You're changed from it. And that's what like proxy trauma is, right? Teachers, first responders, cops, firefighters, right? Doctors.
Mm.
Is they see stuff that just can't be unseen.
Yeah.
Death, sex, drugs, violence, tissue damage,
Yeah.
injury, trauma, life
Mm.
altering
Mm.
events. And that's what
So.
trauma is. So it's good to be precise, because too often I hear people, okay, I'm anxious, I have anxiety. Okay, why do you have anxiety? And they go through it, and you say, no, that's a human experience. That's what it is to know my worries, the way I worry, and the way I think about things is so much greater or so much beyond anyone else. I feel so much greater. Yeah, that's not how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
I know you'd like it to be the case that you win the trauma
The trauma.
Olympics and you feel things more greater than everyone, and
Yeah.
you think things more greater than every. It's unlikely you do.
Mm-hmm.
What's probably happening is some people may perceive that they have better resiliency tools than you do, so it feels like yours is more catastrophic, critical.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bigger emergency,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's the case.
It just, oh, what were you going to
No,
say?
that's
It's just a lot of times becomes this crutch then, and it's debilitating.
right.
Those with the people that are really, instead of, yes, it's hard to like evaluate the trauma that you go through, but if you're not, then it does become, right, that crutch that changes you.
Yeah.
Instead of, with time, obviously, you have to allow time a little bit, but to look back and be able to communicate with yourself what you went through, and at least how it has made you to make decisions moving forward, not to be stuck in it
Right.
or avoid it, because then you can't be you and make decisions moving forward.
A traumatic
correctly.
event, a traumatic experience, a tragedy, it instructs, it provides a framework for how we respond to other tragedies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The idea of fight, flight, freeze,
Mm-hmm.
flop, fawn, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
These six ways we tend to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But we fixate on like the freeze and fight, because that's like imminent threat, terror upon
Yeah.
me. And we can spend more
Yeah.
time in the flight. And we think of flight as, oh my gosh, threat upon me, now I must sprint off this way. But there are
Yeah.
different ways to flee.
Like yes, I agree.
Sometimes you can utilize energy to observe and identify a threat that's in a little more distance, so you can prepare and really maybe quickly get stuff together and make sure you have the things that you need, and make sure the people that are you're responsible for have what they need, and then you can start fleeing slowly.
Yeah.
And this can happen in every form of predator, every form of danger.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts, I think it's what we can at least avoid today, 2023, practically in modern America, is reduce the amount of crime that is committed against our children, your children.
Because if children, if we don't, and children are constantly living in a state of fear, to cause some sort of fight, flight, freeze, fawn,
Flop.
flop, fuck,
Yeah.
right? But the fight, flight, freeze, those, whatever. If developmentally children are constantly in trauma, the flee one is dangerous, because you can flee thoughts and flee also ways that you do things to stay away from a memory or a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So we can also be fleeing here, which isn't healthy, because then it does create, like, disorders and disassociated thinking of how you do react and make decisions.
Fleeing in the mind while you're wallowing in it in the body.
Yeah.
And so you're still experiencing it. You're just,
So developmentally, you're even making it more tragic, because physiologically it's affecting you too, because of the hormones that you are constantly in.
Right.
And like making, because of the state of flee, fight, flight, whatever.
And what I've come to is fear.
Kids are scared.
Yeah, they're scared.
Fear.
But they're scared for a reason. They're scared because they are too often unsafe and unsecure in their own homes.
Mm-hmm.
The big secret of life is just how much abuse children are experiencing in every home.
Yeah.
By either parent or sibling.
Yes.
In some way, shape, or form. and we don't appreciate and we're not aware of, because so much crime isn't intentional. My design is to harm this person and to cause as much mayhem. Most crimes are done recklessly and negligently.
Yeah.
And there's just too much negligent and reckless child abuse happening by parents, by teachers, by healers,
or siblings who are supposed to be babysitting
and by
and raising them.
protectors.
You're helping, but that it causes harm, or can, many times. Pause. Hi, Stan. Oh, that one's off now. Oh,
dude, fucking with me.
Huh. Oh, there. Whatever you did.
Okay.
Okay. Cheers, light guy.
Yeah. Where were we?
We might need a rug on there.
Trauma. Negligent and reckless parenting.
Oh, and we were talking about the siblings. Oh, anyone, all
and
of the
siblings.
people that can.
And okay, what's crime? Well, crime is certainly when there is physical injury and property damage. And we just allow entirely too much physical injury, sexual injury, and property damage to happen. Let alone when we start getting into the emotional abuse.
Yeah.
And the harm that children experience in their homes. But all of this is a form of developmental trauma. Like there's a level of where every kid experiences suffering at the hands of older humans. It's a universal human experience. But there does become something where it's just inordinate. It happens too soon, when the kid's too young, too intensely, too frequently. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect, betrayal of what? Of the needs that this child has. Neglect is in failing to even identify or spend the time trying to find what this kid needs. It's grabbing a crying kid and always feeding them a bottle, and sometimes you need to change them. Sometimes they're cold. Listen to them.
Yeah.
And we stop doing that. And that's neglect. And children feel it.
Yeah, they do.
They are angry. They have complex emotions because they become neglected at some point.
And they can tell when they're, even as infants, if there's avoidance in the eye contact and in the cooing and in the talking, they're naturally trying to relate with something else. And there's a lot of, when parents are traumatized or going through, issues of stress, then it naturally causes those issues of neglect when you don't even think that you are neglecting.
But the irony, right? Alanis Morissette, isn't it ironic? It's like a traumatic event that saved your life, right? These trauma experiences, both developmental and abusive, and you can really distinguish them between real abuse, like abuse, and stuff you just went through. And these are different. I say going to a doctor to heal something on your body can be traumatic, but it's part of the healing process. It's part of the growing process. Going to the doctor and having him violate you, right, for his pleasure, right? He sticks a finger inside you where he shouldn't have. He has you stripped down and look at you in certain ways he shouldn't have. That's abuse that shouldn't be a part of the healing process.
Exactly.
And what's happening too often is we're calling the real harsh, real consequential, it's all consequential, but it's abuse type stuff normal. We're normalizing it. And we're taking normal trauma and pathologizing it,
Mm.
saying it's the worstest ever. And it's in properly
Mm-hmm.
identifying the types of trauma. It does matter. Because most developmental trauma is a little more simple. It's complex because our brains, our minds are figuring stuff out. But the mind's built to figure out
Mm-hmm.
normal human emotions and experiences and unpredictability even amongst people.
Mm-hmm.
But when that includes physical abuse or terror-based yelling or sexual touching boundary issues, that's a level of mind distortion. This is different.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is every child's going to experience some combination of both. And so as adults that have decided that we're going to be responsible for kids in whatever way, either through our jobs or because we had them, it's our duty to them to give them the tools to navigate the trauma, the abuse, the harm, the stress, and the threats that we ultimately impose on them.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the environments we choose to live, because we choose to move somewhere, because we choose to interact with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a great sign of risky environments. If you have especially either big families that are either blood families or even families of choice, and the children of these people are spending an awful lot of time together in real intimate settings like overnights and things like that, that's a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster, for example.
For example.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's parents' duty to arm your kids with the tools to identify and neutralize the threats that you brought to their door,
Mm-hmm.
and to manage and overcome the stress that you have contributed to, and to overcome and mitigate the effects of the abuse that you either caused or allowed to be caused by your negligence and your good faith negligence,
Yeah,
but your
yeah, yeah.
negligence notwithstanding. And even the intentional abuse that heaped down, because sometimes you were just a cruel, angry, bitter person
Mm-hmm.
that took it out on your kid.
And we too often expect our children to calm down, change their
Right.
behavior, be sorry for something they did when we can't even as parents control ours as we're telling them to
Right.
do it.
You,
And it's confusing and insulting and shameful to the child that they don't even get the lesson except this is how we behave, and even when I do, I'm in trouble.
right.
It's just that's all
My
they
child
feel and
has high
hear.
emotions. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah,
Maybe you should have less high emotions and that
yeah,
kid would come down.
yeah.
So that's the reality of trauma. Yeah, it's bad, but it's not as bad as you probably think. And nobody wins the trauma Olympics. Anybody who is now identifying with their trauma rather than what it taught them.
Well, and when you spend time connecting, realizing what your trauma is, and connecting to where it you do feel it in your body. It was what we've been talking about, the mind body connection. You can you can learn to control that trauma and make it a part of you that allows you to be open to like, how did that trauma help me in a way that has made me stronger and better. Um, but it resides in our mind and in our body, and we've got to learn to listen to it and find out why. And the whole idea of the trigger, well, then if something's triggering you in a way that you need to say that you're triggered somehow, there's something in your mind or body is trying to tell you something, and you need to go figure out what it's trying to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
so things like that won't happen again.
Where are the threats?
Mm-hmm.
Where are the threats, and what is invading my sleep,
Mm-hmm.
my diet, my movement, and my relationships with people?
Mm-hmm.
The problem with so many people, sleep's invading their sleep and diet's invading their diet. and movement's invading their movement, and relationships are invading the relationships. They're out of whack in all four.
Yeah.
And
It's hard to put Humpty back
it's hard to
together
put it back
again.
together again.
Uh-huh.
But that's at least just a place to start in identifying the threats. But just identifying the and being aware of a threat enough isn't enough if you can't overcome it.
Yeah.
And there are ways to overcome it. We're going to teach you about a little thing that any competent practitioner in the healing arts should be aware of by now, especially anyone who claims to be treating trauma. And we're going to give it away because there's too many really bad perpetrators who are presenting themselves as healers or teachers or protectors. And they're just causing harm. So we're going to teach you about a thing called trust expression therapy. And it's taking things you've heard of and it's actually making them useful. So here's a little preview to some free therapy I'm going to give you. If your therapist is doing EMDR therapy for you, you're wasting your money. It's a parlor trick. If anybody is claiming to do somatic therapy with you, get your money back, move on to somebody else. This is a parlor trick, and it's like saying go on a walk or calm down. So if you want to do EMDR, here's what you do. Go on a walk. But don't have a reason, don't have a timer, don't have a pace. You're just trying to walk. You're walking through a neighborhood, you can walk around a track, but you're not doing it for time or distance. You're just walking. You can do a bike.
Look around.
And
See
the
what's
point
around
is,
you. Enjoy.
As you walk, you turn your head side to side.
Enjoy what's outside.
The left brain and the right brain starts to alternate and start to fire. That's what EMDR does. And that's why they do the little stimulation where you can do buzz, 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 buzz. That too. You want to play around with each other's hands? Teach you to touch, 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 touch. Okay? Singing Tibetan singing bowl. That's kind of the same thing. It's getting the vibration going with auditorily. You can put on stereo headphones and listen to cool producers that do different things to each side of the brain. And that's EMDR. It's not that deep. And yeah, it has a little bit of effect, but it's not going to do what they say it does alone. There's too much cloggage. There's too much other things going on. You can't. It's like getting a quick massage. It's paying $15, in the massage chair at the mall for 10, 15 minutes. Yeah, it feels better, and then by the time, but I ain't gonna work out any of these kinks or these knots. Okay. The other one is somatic work, breath work. Okay. Here's the big surprise. Here's the big secret on breath work and somatic therapy. First of all, it also doesn't work for a lot of reasons. Secondly, it triggers really negative emotions without the ability to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So good work. It's a good thing to do. It's nice to find a way to control the breath, but don't do any more than 3 or 4 reps. You shouldn't be doing this for more than a song. Put a song on, do a little breathing. Here it is. Breathe in all as much as you can.
Deep into your belly.
Repeat 2 times. Nose, mouth, I don't care. You can go in through your nose, out through your nose. You go in through your nose, out through both. Right now, the point is just to get a lot of the good stuff that's in the atmosphere and the oxygen and completely fill the lungs and completely expel them 3 times, 4 times. Don't do more than 4. That's somatic work. And you can do that throughout the day. But if there's somebody that's selling you somatic work where they're having to do these floppy things and you drop on your heels, yeah, you can go up to your tippy toes, hold up high, and then drop and feel the ground into your heels through your body. Feel that. That's grounding, right? You can do that. That's EMDR.
Shake your energy out.
That's EMDR. That's somatic work. But if that's what your therapist is doing, They're a wook, not a witch.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. Trauma is stress that happens too soon, too frequently, and too intensely. And that can happen from a lot of different ways, not just one thing, and we focus on the one thing. But if we have many things that are stressful all at once, that's a pretty bad day. And that can be traumatic. Doesn't mean you're any different than anybody else. And it doesn't make you who you are. There are personality tests. Personality tests aren't a thing. It's your environment that isn't changing. You're self-selecting for the same people in the same locations. You just have different accoutrements, and so your responses, your survival tools are the same. But if you were progressing, if you were healing, you would have more tools, better tools to respond to threats and stress, and you would survive differently than you have been. If those types of therapies worked, it would have worked by now. If religion was going to work, it would have worked by now. If modern psychotherapy, CBT, DBT, EMDR was going to work, it would have worked by now. And if psychedelic assisted therapy was going to work, it would have worked by now. But that doesn't work either, and it's got the same problems. Mushrooms are dangerous. We just had a doctor try to take down a plane after doing mushrooms. Ketamine is dangerous and addictive.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Perry just died because of his reliance on ketamine. The people who are doing ketamine, it's like going to the 15-minute massage chair and saying that's going to solve years
Worked out my kink.
of
Yeah.
a bent and misshapen back. They've got it wrong. And people need to move slower on this type of therapy. EMDR, long term, long duration, can be injurious. Breath work, in long durations, can be injurious. Trying to teach mindfulness or meditation as therapy is injurious. Doing psychedelic assisted therapy for healing rather than evolving is injurious. Because all of these things, what they do is the people are experiencing a distortion, a dysfunction of the mind, of cognition. And these different, religion, if it would have worked by now, it would have, right? It takes someone in their distorted state, in their traumatized state, in their fight, flight, freeze state. And it gives them more distortion. It hits them in the emotional imagination side of their brains. It activates them and it takes it. They are Beetlejuice. It's any answer to grief.
And the important part of all of these healing therapies is going back to yourself with your logic and reason to apply, to analyze, apply reason through that crazy imaginative thing that you went through, whether it was good or bad. And reason and right, analyze, apply so you can move forward with the information or knowledge that you learned out of it. So you've got to learn something. Yes, sometimes it's bad, but it allows you to be careful and learn from, and move forward in other ways that allow you to stay safe and secure. So we need to use these stressful experiences with our logical parts of the brain, but it is what you're saying is we get too caught up in that. It's too much. The imagination part, the crazy experience, the thoughts that go out of control with the what ifs, and we do not spend enough time as humans really feeling those and doing that, pulling through why did I have to go through that? Well, how did it make me? And using those things, that logic part of our brain, and this is what Bloom says, you have to analyze and apply before you can put it all together and create, which is moving forward with sound decision-making skills. And as humans, we did go through stress and trauma as early humans trying to just survive. But now that we have the luxury, like we went through then, the luxuries of change, we should be able to survive without worry in a world with this much. But we're still fighting to survive in ways that are ridiculous.
And
So it's coping, and now we can't even cope through reality.
and the reality is the adults have failed the children. And so kids, and by that especially I mean 18 to 25 to 27 to 30-year-olds, you're going to have to do it yourself.
You are.
And the adults that want to help their kids, you're going to have to do it yourself. And then you can help them do it their self. There is a path, a process, an experience that overcomes trauma. And the result is that you become an adult that has better sleep, better nutrition and metabolism, better movement, and better relationships. It really isn't that deep. It never has been. Or something like that.